Hey, folks, welcome back. It's good to have you here. I am very excited, feeling very excited to introduce you to our guest today, who's none other than Tim Shields, a friend of mine. We met through a community called Consciousness Club and have known each other. Gosh, it must be a couple of years now, huh, Tim? Is that right?
It's hard to say. It feels
Yeah.
like it. It might only be like a couple months or a year. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We've had a bunch of cool connects on Zoom, and I was also on your podcast a few months ago. Your podcast, The Inciting Incident, episode number 32. I'll link it in the show notes. Following the
I had a
fellow,
lot of I had a very good response from that. A
yeah,
lot of people really loved that episode.
beautiful. I love to hear it. Yeah. Well, I enjoyed doing it with you. I always enjoy hanging out. I feel like you ask such good questions, and I know that's also the nature of your work in the world and things, but I really want to endorse your podcast and encourage people to head over and check it out because I've enjoyed the episodes that I've listened to and I've enjoyed being a guest on it. So just want to say thank you for sharing your work in the world the way you are.
It's my pleasure. I mean, it's partly selfish because I just love learning about people and human stories as a writer and author and literary collaborator, the more you can pull from different places, the more material you have to put out into the world.
That's exactly right. It resonates. I mean, here I am with my podcast, the same. So okay, for those of you who have been here before, you know this is a field first podcast. And what that means is that we invite you to listen not only to the words and the topics and the themes that Tim and I are exploring here today, we also invite you to notice where Tim and I are speaking to you from. Just taking a couple of breaths here and inviting you to do the same. All of our listeners, inviting you to take a couple of breaths and drop in with us. So I say, notice not only the words we're saying, but also where we're speaking to you from, and noticing the field of consciousness this podcast is recorded from. And the invitation here is to take some deep breaths, to relax, to allow ourselves to be resourced by and even recreated from the field of consciousness that this podcast is sourced from. I'm just going to take a moment and be here together. Want to welcome you, Tim, and all of our listeners. Very, very grateful to have you here and looking forward to going on this journey with you, Tim. Welcome, welcome. Or as we say here in Medellin, bienvenidos. Welcome.
Nice. I wish I could remember my Spanish, but gracias, gracias. Yeah,
Exactly. Perfect.
yeah. When you said something about being aware of where we're speaking from, it was like my energy dropped right into my heart.
Uh-huh.
I was not expecting that, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Tell me what happens for you experientially. You feel your energy drop right into your heart. Tell me experientially what's happening for you.
Um, well, I mean, that's usually where I go when I meditate. I usually go into my heart and then I cast a field around me from the heart. Um, I'm putting an author on the spot here for to come up with language, but it's just like there was all of a sudden this kind of subtle like expansion. I won't call it an explosion, but it was like my awareness went there, and then my heart center expanded. So there was some sort of amplification that occurred.
Yeah. And when I'm listening to you, I make up, you've had this kind of experience of noticing where your awareness is oriented from and the contours of your subtle energy field. How long have you been aware of this? What got you started being aware of this? I guess I'm asking you, what was your inciting incident? That's probably what I'm asking, but
Yeah, I mean, my mind went to many different places there,
yeah,
but
yeah,
really the inciting incident was, you know, I had some teachers when I was younger that I guess saw something in the way I express things, And then I always say my inciting incident started when I was 17, and that's how I start all my podcasts. Who were you? Where were you? And did you have any idea who you wanted to be when you were 17? And there were three things that kind of happened. Well, there was actually four. There's a fourth that I kind of usually forget and leave out. But I was, I call myself a martini baby. If my dad were alive, he'd be 102 years old. He was the third day in Normandy in World War II. So there's almost 9 years between me and my closest sibling. And my closest sibling, Noelle, her boyfriend, I was probably like 10 years old, how long I had known this guy. And I just idolized him. And he was the first guy that ever made, smart look cool. He was brilliant, athletic, um, and he wanted to be a writer. And, he kind of always sort of planted that seed in me. So, and then when I was 17, so that was, I guess the inciting incident was taking a huge dose of mushrooms at a Grateful Dead concert, and just kind of my mind expanding way beyond what I thought this dimension was all about. And I just, I was like, whatever's happening in this dimension, I want to know about it. And, I want to learn about it. I want to express it in the world. I wanted to express the human experience, of course, through my own lens. And as a writer, hopefully you can express something that is universal. And then, I started keeping a journal at 17, and I wanted to be a writer so bad. I started, saying the prayer of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace, and I just asked to be used as an instrument of peace. And I mean, never could I have imagined that that would lead me to intersect with some of the biggest thought leaders, in the field of consciousness and transformation, human potential. But I I've always been a journal writer. I probably have like 65 journals of my life on paper. And then since October 2010, I've been doing this gratitude and intention exercise. So I probably have another 15 or 20, notebooks of every day I write down five things I'm grateful for and five things I want to create. Um, but yeah, I mean, I went to college, wound up studying writing and philosophy. And then, you get into your 20s and you're like exploring all possibilities. And I was in New York at like the very tail end of the dot-com bust, chasing IPOs and all this stuff. And then I wound up getting laid off. And I just, I was lost, as you are at that age, and trying to figure out what to do. And my brother, one night I was like living in this, big pre-war brownstone on the Upper West Side in New York City, but I was living with like this 65-year-old manic depressive landlady and like two Israeli guys. And we just like stayed in our little, caverns. And I had this tiny room. All I could do was pace around like two sides of a queen size bed. And I was talking to my brother one night, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, dude, you don't have to live in New York to make money. And I was like, what? Because when you're in New York and you're young, your blinders are on, and in like always the biggest decisions of my life, in about 10 seconds, I was like, all right, well, where do I have friends? Okay, my best friend Ben is in Seattle. I'm gonna go to Seattle. And I wound up in Seattle for 19 years. But I also, one thing was that I was just chasing all of these, possibilities. And I had some friends who were in finance, and one of them, I'm like, just get me in there. Just get me in there. I was like, I just wanted to make money and probably feel safe and secure, which I guess that was the other thing. Somewhere around 17, my father kind of there was like a split in the law firm he was in, and he kind of got pushed out. So we lost our financial security, which is, always been kind of this theme. But yeah, so I was like, get me into finance. And like, my couple of my friends were like, this is going to destroy your soul. You do not want to do this. Like, you are an artist, like do what you're supposed to do. Finally, I met one guy, and he worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 101st floor of the World Trade Center. And he's like, yeah, I'll get you in for an interview and stuff. And by that time I was already like kind of over that. And, so I interviewed I interviewed for like Merrill Lynch and a couple other things, and I got passed up for two jobs in the World Trade Center. And I left New York in July 9th, 2001. And then
Whoa,
we know how the rest of that story.
my
Yeah,
God.
I always say if I'm a
Squirrels
cat,
everywhere.
yeah, I always say if I'm a cat, I have about 4 lives left. But yeah. So I went out to Seattle and I kind of had like a decade of sick parents. My dad had lung cancer. He died in 2004. My mother passed away in 2010. And but she was kind of slipping. I was on the West Coast and they were kind of hiding it from me because I was the baby. And, every time I go home, there would be like less and less of my mother kind of there due to Parkinson's and dementia and stuff like that. So when my mom passed away in 2010, I was kind of like, all right, it's my time. Because as a young man, I knew that if I wanted to have big things to write about, I had to have big experiences. And I did spend part of that decade traveling. Like I had a relationship and a job end in the same week. And I was like, all right, life's trying to tell me something. And I always wanted to do something of service. And this girl was like, I need time and space. And I disappeared for 5 days. And then she's like, text me, what are you doing? I'm like, I just bought a one-way ticket to Tanzania. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And I volunteered in an orphanage for a month. And then I just cruised around the game parks for the next month. My friend and I, 2 different summers, tried to do our own like travel show in in Provence and then along the Camino. And it wound up just being about 2 idiots from New Jersey trying to make a travel show because we really had no concept. We were just kind of like throwing a camera in people's faces and like, we're in the fashion capital, just starting parties everywhere we went. We're like, we're in the fashion capital of the world. What's the color next year? And it's just like, it was so ridiculous. And all of our foolish adventures along the way. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah. And then, so I guess to bring this up, to wrap up the 2010 thing, while I did do a lot of traveling, you know, a lot of my quote unquote vacations were going back to New Jersey to visit my parents who were, elderly and stuff like that. So when my mom passed away, I was like, all right, it's my time. But I was totally lost. I thought I was prepared for my mother's passing. And then when she actually did, I'd been preparing for like 2 years. And then once the finality of something like that happens, it's like the rug is swept out it's like the rug is swept out from under you. So I was totally lost. And I wound up talking to a friend of my sister's who was like an energy, healer kind of person. And she's like, all right, you're a writer. I want you to do this exercise every day. I want you to write down 5 things you're grateful for and 5 things you want to create. And you're going to find the things that you create today are going to be the things you're grateful for in the future. And I was like, all right, I'll try anything. And I wasn't working at the time because I was always freelancing. And in like May, I left this ad agency job, to go home to say goodbye to my mom. And when I came back, they're like, sorry, you don't have a job anymore. So I spent these like 2 months just like walking Seattle, waiting for my mom to pass away as she was like on hospice and stuff like that. But I started doing this gratitude and intention exercise and like, boom, everything started happening, in a
Mhm.
pretty magical and mystical way, including finding the right job for the right time. And then it was a 3-month contract. And then they were like, they extended it another 3 months. And I said, well, I'm taking off because I was going to go travel. And I was like, all right, well, I'm taking off at 6 months. And then right before I left, my boss like pulled me aside and he's like, just bill me for 30 hours a week for the rest of the rest of the contract. So I was just getting paid to travel for free. And then I wound up like linking up with a buddy who was like, he had this business where he was the school photographer at international schools. So he'd take his equipment over there and he'd hire a friend. So I'm like a backpacker and I'm staying at business hotels and just like, he's like, come on, smile. And I'm behind the computer. Like I have like 10 seconds to, grab immortalize the image of this fourth grader and stuff like that. But it was just a comedy. And so yeah, I traveled for actually 15 months, but I wound up writing my first book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment. The URL is just A Curious Year, but I guess I should explain the title. I was living in Seattle right near the sculpture park, and there was this vivarium there, and I didn't even know what a vivarium was, but I used to walk through it on my way home every day, and it was like this nurse log had fallen like 30 miles away, and they brought it there, and they created the vivarium around it, which mimicked its natural state out there, so it became a nurse log, and so it would always like it was always changing through the season. And one day I just happened to be walking through there, and I never noticed the chalkboard before, and it said Vive means life, Vivarium means a place of life. And I was like, oh my God, that's the concept of the book. Inside the vivarium is our individual life experience, but outside is what we're all connected to, which is consciousness. And I mean, I don't really go into that. I just put the definition of a vivarium up front in the book. But so that is kind of the central concept. It's kind of like an eat, pray, love meets wild from a man's perspective. So, maybe more sex, drugs, rock and roll, but a deeper philosophy about consciousness and the nature of creation, if you will.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, what a cool metaphor. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
So,
so I want to come. There's so much beauty in what you shared, Tim, that I want to explore with you. The first place I want to go is actually to the very beginning of what you just shared, and ask you, when you took the mushrooms at the Grateful Dead concert and you went into this other dimension, can you tell us about the experience that you had at the concert on mushrooms?
well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know that anybody's ever really kind of asked me that, but, I speak of it very high level, but it was almost like, I describe it as it was like I was breaking out of my fascia, or the Incredible Hulk. I expanded into something else. And, it's kind of like a mushroom journey for somebody who's never done it. It's kind of like going up in a rocket ship. It can be super intense on the way up. And then you get to orbit, and you're just like, you feel this unity and this connection. But in that, that metaphorically speaking, that ride up, I mean, I had all of this anxiety, and it was like all of this stuff that I'd been carrying and for, the imprints and the programming and the conditioning and the fears and all that stuff. It was like a fracture of what this kid was. And I think Rumi said that, the fracture or the crack is where the light comes in. And it's just you know you can think of it like if you talk about a jet flying from New York to Paris and you alter it by 1 degree, it changes the entire trajectory of the flight. And I would say that that experience changed the entire trajectory of my life, because in a way, I was, we were young and we were like partying with mushrooms, but a fair amount, but it was like I was always chasing that experience, which was fun, quote unquote, but really it was a transcendental experience. And anything that like connects me with sort of the deepest levels of myself, which is, a fractal of God or consciousness or the one, is kind of what I've always been chasing. And at the core of my work, there are two pillars. There are two pillars and one question. The pillars are surrender and trust, because that's what I'm trying to master in my life, especially as a writer and artist, where it's a pathless path, as J. Krishnamurti said. But the other, the central question to probably anybody's life is, who am I? And so that's always what I'm trying to get at. And it's, who am I beneath, Tim Shields and the personality and the wounds and the experiences, and, who am I? Who are we? And, I mean, I always say, I mean, my favorite quote is by Teilhard de Chardin, who was a French Jesuit poet, priest, paleontologist, um, who got actually excommunicated from the church. So I always say he was probably doing something right. But he said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that is the lens or the prism through which, I view my life. I mean, we're here to have these experiences to kind of awaken us to the truth of who we are, and maybe on this journey all back to oneness. So, I kind of, in my new book, I kind of talk about it as like we're you know, everything is a fractal, and a fractal is a repeating pattern at all scales. And, ultimately, I think we're just circulating through this torus field of energy and experience and matter and form, and back to energy and experiences as we are. I don't know, purifying ourselves of anything that is not love, perhaps.
Yeah, beautiful. I've taken mushrooms several times in my life and had experiences similar to what you're talking about. So I just want to name that to meet you in the
Yeah,
yeah.
it cracked me open, and it just, I still have, obviously, the human frailties of anxiety and fear and all that stuff, but it just, I mean, for that moment and for a week or two afterwards, I was like liberated from all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just living in this, connected, pure state. And I remember, like, thank God we didn't have cell phones back then, because I wanted to call my parents and tell them how much I loved them and be like, I'm just on a drug right now, but I have a good head on my shoulders, and like, I love you guys, and like call my siblings and be like, now I understand what you guys are talking about, blah, blah, blah. But I just white knuckled that one out until I hit the unity consciousness. So I guess that is what I experienced, and that is what I've been seeking is are those transcendental moments of unity consciousness. And where I experience them the most is when I'm writing, and I just completely disappear, and I'm just connected into a channel or a stream of information. And my days, fortunately or unfortunately, but very often my days are tied to the the um the quality of my writing. So if I have, an amazing day of writing, I'm just floating on cloud nine. If I don't do as much writing or whatever, I'm, a little bit off, but I'm becoming more aware of that. So I don't let it get to me as much. But, I mean, I think that's what anybody, anybody is kind of, I said in this new book, Dream Tethering, like, intelligence is the ability to recognize patterns. And my 21-year-old nephew was just here, and I was like, "Where do you see patterns in your life?" Because we played this game, Rummy Cube, and I was like blown away at how good he was, and he was putting all these pattern numbers and patterns together. But yeah, I mean, no matter what you're doing, I mean, if you're coaching somebody, you're recognizing their patterns. If you're like a stockbroker, if you are a musician, an artist, you're recognizing patterns. And like, I think when you get to a certain level and you connect into those patterns, then you're just streaming information. Um, so,
So tell me about what's happening for you in relationship with the question, who am I now?
um, wow. Well, I mean, that's another good question. I've kind of been footloose and fancy free for a long time, like a real, living the bachelor life. And, part of that was, I think part of it's timing, part of it's maturity. Um, Part of it was me knowing that I couldn't settle down until I had done all these things. And now I feel like I've done so much that, I'm more thinking about the legacy stage of my life. So this is like all about the output. But yeah, I mean, like, I moved to Denver with somebody, and I'm in a relationship. So it's like, that's a question of who am I, in relation to that? Who am I in context to this other person? But I mean, it's funny because I always wanted, like, the wife, the kids, the white picket fence, all that stuff. Maybe not the white picket fence, but all that stuff. And I chose this path of the artist because I feel like, it's my soul's calling. And I recognized it very, very young. And it's been a very hard path. I mean, I feel like I've finally kind of gotten to, a place where I'm working with the caliber of people that I want to be working with. I've never like chased anybody. They've always kind of come to me through manifesting or serendipity or synchronicity. Um, so, I mean, the one kind of, I mean, who am I? I guess I could say, who am I in relation to the public publishing industry? Because I've worked with, these thought leaders, um, you know, I mean, for 6 years, I was Dr. Joe Dispenza's editor. I worked with, Dr. Zach Bush. I'm working with the CEO of a publicly traded company on a huge story, and which I feel like is some of my best work. And I'm getting a full writing credit with him. The next project, this doctor who I feel like is putting things together at the level of Joe Dispenza, and I'm getting a full writing credit with her. Or she might just want me to write it like James Nestor, Breathe, like as a journalistic discovery of her process and everything. But I had a call with a top spiritual, publishing house yesterday, and I got the same runaround. It's like, yeah, we love your work, but you don't really have a big following, and it's like, and it kind of took me down for a little bit yesterday. And then I was walking and I was like, all right, well, I always do this thing, what's beneath that? And I'm like, all right, what's beneath that? And I go down, down, down. And okay, well, I want to be seen and recognized for my own work. I've been a behind the scenes guy for a long time. And then I was like, well, um, wanting to be seen and heard, is that like a wound from my childhood and my family and stuff like that? Yeah, probably. So it's like, who am I in relation to my wounds? Who am I in relation to? I mean, I guess it's just, who am I in relation to the external world? What is the feelings and emotions? Um, how do I interact with the external world, and how do I process things? I'm kind of rambling, but I guess I was kind of going back to the publishing industry, and I was thinking about talking to like two or three of my clients who became my friends to see if they would, be interested in, um, funding, being the financial backer to getting this book out in the world, maybe through a hybrid model. And I didn't even get to ask the question yesterday to one of my best friends, and she was like, "Well, why don't we just start our own publishing company?" And I was like, "Well, that's an interesting and inspired idea. I don't know. I don't know if I want to be running a publishing company, but I would love to be the gatekeeper, to allow people into this world who have really significant things to say. Because if we don't have like artists, leading the way, politicians are, they're pretty worthless. They're self-serving parasites, a lot of them, not all of them. But, artists have always been the people who are, make the biggest imprint in the field, who change consciousness. Um, so yeah, I mean, all these big publishing, my book proposal went out in last February, and I was like, God, I hope I get a couple bites on this book. And I got like 18 responses from all the big publishers in New York. And then one by one, they all came back and they said, well, you don't really have a big following, so, we don't think you can sell the book. I wound up getting one book deal with this, I won't name the publisher, but and they wanted me to totally rewrite the book. And I kind of had a panic attack. I was like about to play tennis. It took me about 5 days to process all this, and I'm like about to serve in tennis, and I had like a panic attack. I mean, but I finally was like, all right, I owe it to myself to give this a shot at least and see what happens. So I put my head down for 76 to 79 days. I cut 25,000 words. I rewrote the book. And I, in humility, I can say that it's a much better book. It's a much tighter book. But yeah, I mean that again, that these big publishing houses, and it's the same with music because my nephew's a luckily he got into like a huge touring band, but everything is about the followers, and I call it the pop culture crap machine. It's like just because you have a following, then you get anointed with the deals or whatever. And it's like, what happened to like marketing and all this stuff? And so, I mean, I get it's a business at the end of the day. So they take estimated risks on all this stuff on a ton of different authors. But I mean, what if you just had a small model where you put 5 books out a year that were like mind-blowing books that would, you know, alter, you know, alter human consciousness? So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm not like worrying about it anymore. I'm like, in some ways, I thought this book was ready to go 4 years ago, and in some ways, I'm just like, well, I'm kind of being divinely, divinely held for the right time and the right opportunity where this message can get out to the greatest amount of people. So I feel like in the book proposal, I said Eckhart Tolle created this opening like 30 years ago. And this is like the next opening for people who are already on the path, who already have this body of knowledge, and they're kind of looking for what's next. And I'm I think it's going to blow people's minds because it blows my mind. And I was living in Palm Springs for like a while, and I would just go for walks like when I got to the end of a chapter on this Native American land, and I'd put on my headphones, distract my thinking brain, get myself into trance, and before I went for a walk, I'd be like, "What's next in this book?" And
Mm.
the information would just come piling through, and never in a million years could I have like sat down to intentionally write the book that came through me. I mean, you know, I call in the new book like instead of channelers, code breakers, because I was running along the beach one day in Oregon, not thinking about anything, and then my mission statement dropped in, like, and I'm like, oh my god, I got to write it down. It was I translate light, frequency, and energy into story, so as to lead others to their truth. So that's like my personal mission statement. And then my professional one is I help artists, visionaries, and global change makers articulate and amplify their ideas through the economy of words. So that's kind of, what I'm doing. I actually have this on my website, The Real Tim Shields. You can download this free mission statement exercise
Mm.
because, my girlfriend or whatever you call them these days, partner, lady friend, I have no idea, but she always says like, we have to be intentional about, what we're doing. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. I get it. But I didn't really. And then I was, on one of my walks recently in Denver, and I just had this like drop in download. It's like, oh, it's so simple. What is intention? Intention prevents drift. And my new book is about the power of the focused mind. So obviously, you have to be intentional about what you're doing, and how more intentional could you be if you have a mission statement? So everything has to, for me personally, everything has to ladder up. My projects or whatever have to ladder up to those mission statements. Like in times when I, really needed money, I passed up opportunities because they didn't, writing with people because they didn't line up to my mission statement. And also, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm not going to do well. I'll probably still do a pretty good job, but like, you know, I want to work with people where I'm learning something, and then, expressing it, helping them express it through my own prism. And actually, like a lot of the books I've worked on, I've kind of dropped seeds in there that point back to this new book, Dream Tethering. So I'm kind of seeding all of these things. At some point, people probably put it all together, but maybe not. It doesn't really matter.
I'll link your website and also the exercise, the intention
Okay.
practice from
Yeah.
your website in the show notes so people can have it. I want to ask you about because you've sent me a few chapters of this new book you've written, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, can you share more with us about, I mean, what's the core insight, the core come from the wisdom, the gold, the treasure that's in this book?
Well, it's called Dream Tethering, 13 Keys to Creating the Life of Your Dreams. And in the first book, I talked about the dream of the 17-year-old self, which is I put it out as fiction, but it's based on my story. And I said the dream of the 17-year-old self is like shooting a grappling hook out into the future. And if you're strong enough, focused enough, and determined enough, and you stay on the line, you're going to get there. But the external environment is always going to knock you off. And then I went more deeply into that in this book. And of course, the external environment is just a mirror of your internal environment. So it's really about, you know, going, you know, going after your dreams, learning how to follow the felt path and follow the breadcrumbs and surrender and trust and create it in through consciousness as opposed to like being a wrecking ball moving through life and, betraying people and doing whatever you have to do to climb to the top. So it's really, instead of thinking about a goal and moving towards it, it's actually like a reverse engineering where you pull the goal, you pull the goal or the dream to you, and when you are, um, in alignment with your mind, body, and spirit, and right thinking, right feeling, right action, and right language, which includes the way you speak to yourself, you become like the boring machine, and matter conforms to your will. Another way you could think of it is you become the vortex, and you pull all these opportunities and things into you. So, along the way, I mean, I have like a whole new definition. I have a whole new idea about time and what time really is. And I updated the hero's journey as the evolution of consciousness. And I created a new model of self-actualization that I wound up calling the Circletron. And this all started during COVID when I was working with my friend Mandy in New Braunfels, Texas. And there wasn't much to do except, cook, eat, drink, garden, and then go down to the Guadalupe River. And every time I went down to the Guadalupe River, it was just like these massive downloads. And we had been talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs that day. And I'm just walking down there as I always do with my headphones on. And this image of concentric circles popped into my head. And I was like, yeah, I mean, self-actualization is not a pinnacle or peak state at the tip of a triangle where there is no deviation or fall. It's a dynamic state of expansion and contraction, depending on your point of awareness in that moment. So, so basically, I mean, should I give it a shot to walk you through it?
I'd love that. I mean, out of what you said, there's so much
Yeah.
in what you shared that I want to ask you about.
Well, just ask me. We'll go wherever it takes us.
Well, I'm so curious. Tell me about, you have a whole new relationship with time. Tell us about your new relationship with time.
Well, I was walking through, this place I always went in Palm Springs called Andreas Canyon. And I had a really busy mind that day and, like distracted and whatever. So I just kind of like I actually took off my headphones and I was just like trying to, just process so many things. And then all of a sudden, my mind like heard a bird and then, another bird and then the symphony of birds. And then I started hearing, the lizards moving through the mesquite and the river and the atmosphere. And it was like, I called it the fractal present moment. And I kind of, when you become so present, you receive more information. So I think time is actually a river of information flowing towards us. And the more present you can be, which is I call the fractal present moment, the more information you you can glean. And if you think about somebody in a foxhole or a meditation or a near-death experience, like they can experience the whole universe in like in no time, So it's it's a river of information, and it's about I guess you would say it's creating the right internal conditions where you're not there anymore. There is no personality. There's nothing. You just surrender into the field, and it's not easy. But I mean, it's all about the trance state, I think, and so yeah, I mean, I think the more present you are, and I can do certain things like walking and stuff like that to get really present or just lose myself in music. And when that thinking brain is gone, the river of time, which is the river of information, starts flowing through. And I after so many years of experience, I know not to judge this stream of information because the minute you bring, a human thought process into this field of information, you turn off the faucet. So you just have to be present and just let it, stream through. I'll be like walking around with this little pocket notebook, just trying to get it down as fast as I can. And I realized that one time somebody was like, well, where do you, experience information? And I realized like when I'm writing, when I'm really in it, my head's usually like cocked to the right. And
Mm.
it's like the information is coming through the left side of my brain in a very organized way. It's like myself or my higher self lecturing to me. And I'm just listening and moving my fingers across the keyboard as fast as I can. But when I'm out in nature, I notice the information comes through the right side of my brain and it comes like a torrent of information. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, like, that's where the fractal present moment came in. That's where the circletron came in, like all of this information. I actually, one time, I think it's actually happened twice. Um, Once in my bedroom and then once up in this canyon. But I had a download come in so big, it like knocked me into a rock when I was like walking through this little sort of, this little path around a bend, and it came in and like I just fell into the rock, and I was like, oh my God. And then just like writing down as fast as I can. But yeah, that's one thing. Well, that's the river, that's the fractal present moment at the high level.
Mhm.
So
I love the subtlety and nuance of what you're sharing here about different streams of information coming in from different places. I sometimes I'm talking to people and going, there's a difference between an upload and a download.
hmm
and I've,
yeah.
and I've had experiences where subtle objects or data streams come in so intensely they knock me off.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're the only person I've heard that from, so
Really?
we're
Yeah,
in
yeah,
good
yeah.
company. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I've absolutely had that. Or you ever have them where they're like you're lying down or sitting down, they come in so strong you jump up off the couch and all of a sudden running around, don't know why.
No, but I haven't had that, but like when I like turn into a project, I will be sleeping and wake up and just like grab my phone. I mean, I have so many notes on there. Sometimes I should probably go through them because I forget sometimes that they're in there, but yeah, I mean, some of my biggest ideas, and it might just be a line or two, but it's like it pulls everything together. Have come through dreams, usually around like 3 in the morning,
Mhm.
oddly enough. But yeah,
Interesting. So many people talk about that time window of 3 to 4 in the morning. And it's just something I hear so often people say,
yeah,
launched out of bed at 4 in the morning. And it's a lot of people write about it and speak about it. There's a there
yeah.
seemingly.
I mean, I think between Dr. Joe Dispenza always talks about, I think our brain is making the most melatonin between 1 and 4 in the morning, which is why at once in a week long, I think, yeah, maybe twice, but once in a week long, you wake up at 4 a.m. and you do like a 4 hour, 5 hour meditation, but there is a complete dilation of time. And, by the time, and you're meditating, you're sitting up and then you're laying down for a long time because that's when the nervous system is kind of processing all of this new information. But, I mean, when you're doing this breath, you're like, I mean, it's been a long time since I've been a part of it, but um, you're converting melatonin into these metabolites, and there's a whole scientific thing that's happening, at that hour. But yeah, so it's supposed to be the best between 1 and 4 a.m. is supposed to be the best time to meditate. Can't say I get up that early often to do that, but
What
Yeah.
I've never met Joe Dispenza in person. He's had some impact on me. I read Becoming Supernatural. I don't know. It wasn't 10 years ago, but it was eight
Yeah.
years ago or something like that. I was hiking in the mountains in Boulder and I would listen uh to his book, and there was a couple of podcasts he did that were really activating for me. I've never been to one of his, 7-day retreats. I know a ton of people who've had. I've heard amazing things, but what's it been like for you working with Joe Dispenza?
Well, I mean, he gave me my first break on becoming supernatural, so I was an editor on that book. But I mean, we got to I helped him with his blog for 6 years. So we were like collaborating once a week. And, sometimes to be like, what are we going to write about, this week? And I was like, well, maybe I'd be going through some sort of heartbreak or anxiety or something. And he'd be like, all right, well, you ready? Hit record. And he would just lecture to me. And then I would edit it and turn it into something like that. But, I mean, when I was working on becoming supernatural, I would get these files of, various lectures, various parts of the lectures, which became, the table of contents. But I was just walking around Seattle, listening to these lectures over and over and over, and trying to figure out like what the what the real gems are. How do you say it? And I was completely immersed in. I mean, he was, it wasn't like a formal mentorship. I never said. I mean, I've kind of said stuff like that, but um, I got to live in this material for, well, I mean, I went to my first workshop in 2010. And I mean, this is kind of the how it all happened. My sisters took me to a workshop in 2010 in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and I think the Omega Institute or something. But he was, maybe it was like a 2-day or 3-day workshop, but I was just sitting in the audience like slack-jawed and gobsmacked because I was like, oh my God, this guy's wrapping a toolbox of language around all of these like things I'm trying to figure out and, organize in my mind. How does it all work? And at one point, my one sister kept standing up and, leaning over her chair and pacing. And he's like, I want to see you afterwards. She's like, oh my God, what did I do? He's like, what's going on with you? She said, oh, I hurt my back sleigh riding with my kid. And he was like, all right, well, let's go find a room, because he was originally a chiropractor. And it turns out, at one point in the room, he's like, what's going on with you three? He's like, we're siblings. We're like, we're siblings. He's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it turns out that before I was born, my family lived one town over from his family in New Jersey. So all of a sudden it was like, you went to Alfonso's Pizza? I went to Alfonso's Pizza. And he invited us to be his guests for dinner that night. And we like hit it off like Jersey people outside of Jersey.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a literary agent at the time, to try and put this, experience of when I went to volunteer at the orphanage in Tanzania out into the world. And we exchanged numbers, and he's like, I think I can find somebody for you, but he couldn't find her. It was kind of like before Facebook really was big into it was just kind of coming up. And so I would go back like once a year, for a little tune up. And every time I saw him, I'd be like, we'd be great collaborators. And then in probably late April 2015, one of my sisters and I went to Carefree, Arizona. And there was like it was probably a 4-day workshop. And I was focusing on creating a full-time job because I was always freelancing. And the full-time job would allow me to have the stability to focus on my book and finish a full-time job. And I wanted to create a mentor. And, I was focusing on this power of focused awareness, on this in every meditation. And people are having these profound, mind-blowing, experiences. And I'm like beating myself up, like, I'm not doing it right. I'm a failure at this. And so anyway, I go back to Seattle, and I'm not even off the tarmac yet. I open my phone and I get this, message from a friend who left Microsoft after 10 years through LinkedIn. And he's talking about this unicorn company, and he's like, we need a writer. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then I take the light rail into Seattle, and I run into this guy on the street corner, and he's like, you really got to apply to this job. Long story short, I get the job. Every day before work, I go to a coffee shop for 30 minutes to an hour or more. And I work on this first draft, or this draft I was stuck on for a curious year in the Great Vivarium Experiment. And it took me exactly 6 months to finish. And when, when I finished, I was like, oh my God, I think I have a real book here. And exactly at 6 months, I wound up getting laid off at this job. And I was like, yes, like I'm just going to work on this book all winter. And, I walked out of that job for the last time and I looked up and I just said, what amazing things about to happen to me. And within 3 minutes, I got a text from Dr. Joe's assistant and was like, Dr. wants to talk to you to see if you'd be interested in editing his blogs. And I was just like, holy crap. And
Wow.
that's how it kind of all began. And, you know, I wanted to create I wanted to create the full-time job and the mentor. And it's always about, surrendering the how. And never in a million years could I have written the script that Dr. Joe would become like my mentor, where, this is what I'm trying to express in the world. So, my new book is kind of pulling from all these sort of sources and people. And then, of course, my life experience. So through my prism to create this, my own new thing. But yeah, I mean, literally, it was a dream come true. It was literally a dream come true. I wanted to learn from him, more, and so I got to have a one-on-one once a week, and um, during I think it was like Valentine's Day 2017, I wound up, having to go up to Santa Barbara to meet with him in person. So for a bunch of years, I just Happy Valentine's Day, buddy. Like send him a Valentine's Day thing. That was yeah. I mean, he expects greatness, and it was an amazing time, but it was also like challenging. Um, because I was trying to get certain things. They're very specific steps in like, the pineal gland, or what happens scientifically. And I just remember at one point he was like, "It's not that hard, Tim." And like I'm just, sitting at the keyboard like shitting myself, and then I'd write this stuff down or I'd record it and then I'd run out back, transcribe it, try and figure it out really quick. I mean, that was trial by fire. And also, I mean, that's what you want if you're seeking the path of mastery in any craft or art or anything in life, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just in awe of I want to use the word fortitude that I feel from you. I mean, there's so many experiences you've had, and just, I mean, it's really, opening the door to the mystical path, right? And walking the
Yeah.
mystical path, not just opening the door to it, but when you're living in this world of synchronicity and a call and response type relationship with the universe, and increasingly non-dual relationship between our local personal self and our environment, and uh,
Yeah.
becoming the magnet and attracting in the resource we need. I mean, it takes a lot of fortitude and strength and trust and devotion and love to be able to be available for life, to be available for these kinds of experiences. And I mean, what is it in you that has you do this? Like, where does this fortitude and this capacity and this devotion come from?
Well, I mean, again, maybe going back to 17 or whatever, like I just had this desire to express the mystery and to understand who I am and why I'm here, and um, I mean, my dad was in World War II, my mother's father, they were both incredibly loving people, but I found out at my dad's funeral, he was the only person that survived this attack on this attack in his squad. And I found that out at his funeral. And then my mother kind of had, an alcoholic father. And so these are like these kind of, you know, I kind of write in the book about how, we have these two strands of DNA. And, we can say it's our mother and father. And this is if you look at the DNA, it's kind of, a spiral staircase almost. So this is kind of the spiral staircase that we descend into matter, into the third density. And, I think part of our role, especially at this moment in time, is to kind of break this generational trauma, and break free of the programming and conditioning. And I think generational trauma is just unprocessed energy moving through biology, moving through time, and time is information. But so I always kind of wonder that, like, how did I have the balls to like buy a one-way ticket to India?
Yeah. Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
landed there for 2 days, the first 2 days I was in a hotel, like, also jet lagged, but like, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake. What have I done? Like, in a country of 23 billion people, I don't know anybody, just terrified. But like, so on the human level, I think, especially being inherited from my mother, I inherited a lot of fear. And one time my sister was like, I think all the things you do are kind of like, to counter the pendulum swing, to maybe neutralize that fear. Doesn't mean still I jump into the unknown. And it's not like I don't have fear, but I have enough life experience to know that when you jump, the net appears. Um, so on the human level, I I was a very scared kid, I think, and into my 20s, and losing the financial security. But like on the soul level, I've just always known this is what I'm supposed to do. And I've tried to get off the writing path a couple times. Like, this is too hard. I just need something like secure and stable and predictable. And every time I try that, life just kicks me in the ass in a strong way. And then finally at one point, I was just kind of like, all right, I get it. This is what I'm supposed to do. And that's, when I did kind of surrender to that, that's when the doors, really started to open. But I it's my calling, and I talk about the calling in the new book. And because I think, first of all, you have to be quiet and still enough to hear the calling, and stop chasing validation or ego or whatever. Like, but and I think, the calling and the dream can be can are can be the same thing. And I think the biggest source of anxiety and depression and dysfunction in society is people not following their calling. Like, it's like, if you're not following your calling, and or that which brings you bliss, then you are in a lower state of consciousness. And then, over time, you're just going to get lower. And then in this model of the Circletron, where I have all these concentric circles, I in the beginning of life, you're going out and you're exploring. So these circles in the Circletron, they're actually made up of all of these tiny dots, which represent possibilities in space and time. And each rung represents a level of consciousness. So in the beginning, you're going out and you're experiencing all this stuff. And initially I thought the model, it just goes into infinity. But then I realized that you know, there's at some point there's a pleasure point and a pain point within this Circletron. And the pleasure point is you take control of your life, or you find your calling and you start pursuing it. The pain point is when it gets so bad, life just breaks you and puts you to your knees. And both of these things begin the path back to the center. So the Circletron at first is a two-dimensional model, but then it's actually a torus field. So you start from that center point, and that is life. You go out and have all these things, and then you're returning to that center point. And yeah, I can't even go into the next part of it because it was just a download I had the other day. But I'm like, how do I? It's something to work into this. I'm always rewriting it. I'm on the last rewrite, but there is one thing I want to add to this model. But yeah, I mean, and that is the torus field that we're all moving through. The torus field for people who might not know, it's almost like a donut, and it is the most abundant energy structure throughout the universe, and it is the perfect balanced energetic system. It is homeostasis, and it's progenerative and regenerative.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we're just circulating through this giant torus field um, of possibility, and it's all about where do you want to place your focused awareness. And that's a big part of what dream tethering is about, because like anything you place your awareness on, whether conscious or unconscious, becomes amplified. And so many of us are living by these unconscious programs of fear and lack, etc. That is what we're amplifying in our life. I know because I've done it for a really long time. So, so part of this book is my journey of untangling this, and then how I see the world and put it all together. So it's almost like a whole new framework of consciousness.
I love how when you share about this, you make a torus field with your hands over and over again. It's awesome.
Yeah, I, I'm like maybe I'm Irish, but maybe there's some Italian in me because sometimes I get a little expressive.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Right, right,
that was more like a Jewish guy. And sometimes I get more expressive. There we go. It's Italian. Yeah.
right. When I'm with you, I feel Italian coming from you. If you told me your parents were Italian, I would totally buy
No.
that.
Oh
No,
yeah, yeah. Well, there is like this Italian character I do
okay,
from time to time. So
okay.
yeah, which is not always great when you're in an Italian restaurant. You've had some wine, and then you're talking like this, and
Yeah.
then the people come over, and I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, same, same. I worked for an Indian company when I was just graduated from college, and I developed this really robust Indian accent because I was always working with Indians, and then I would start to do it, and like, oh no, 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 I need to stop doing this.
Yeah. Oh, I get it. I love the Indian. I love doing the Indian accent too. And actually, when I was living in India, I was there for 3 months, and by the end, because of mirror neurons, I was literally like doing the head bob, and I wasn't
Same,
doing it on purpose.
same.
Somebody'd be asking me a question, and I'd just be like going like this. It's pretty wild how you pick that up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us about this consciousness model you've been developing and taking the hero's journey and transforming it and refining it into a model of how consciousness evolves.
Yeah. Well, there's in Campbell's original hero's journey, there's 17 phases. And then I forget what his name is, but I think and now I can't even remember what the name of the book is, but the writers, anyway, there are 12 steps in this other book. So I mapped it to 12 steps, but in mine, it starts out before you're even born. And then the 12th step is becoming an ascended master. And I was going to have being a mystic, the 12th step. And then I had asked Dr. Joe at one point, I was like, we were just having a one-on-one, and I was like, do you think we can become ascended masters in this life? And he's like, duh, that's what we're doing here. Maybe that is the process of moving through the circletron at this level of whatever dimension or paradigm this is. But, so I think, like I said, I kind of talk about how, um, in sort of metaphorically and poetically, but when the sperm pierces the egg, there's a flash of light and billions of zinc atoms are released. So I talk about that as the soul piercing the veil and coming into the third dimension of matter. And then all of those billions of zinc atoms move outward into possibility. And, that is what starts to form the circletron, these various levels of consciousness and possibility. Step two is so that is descending into the DNA, but it's so we not only have this genetic blueprint, but we also carry our entire ancestry energetic patterns. So, part of this path is to recognize and disentangle and liberate yourself from this programming conditioning. And then the next step is like the mirror neurons. We form by, mimicking our surroundings, and that could be lack, it could be dysfunction, it could whatever. You move into programming and conditioning, then there's the search, and there's a bunch of different levels, but I think it maps to it's a pretty common map. So, it's just if you don't have a map, you don't really know where you're going, right? So I'm not saying I'm going to become an ascended master in this lifetime by any means, but I may be laying out something for 2 or 3 generations from now that will have some kind of map, and um, or maybe less, but maybe if it's adopted, maybe it'll even change some storytelling and whatever. Because there are very sort of distinct, around 13 you start to separate yourself from all this stuff, and then there's the search and the crisis and the awakening, and then yeah, it's like recognizing that, becoming the healer, and then at one point it's like, I think I can't remember where it is in the stage, but maybe the mystic is waking up to the fact that you realize we are we're more energy than matter, and that is when you can begin to manipulate. That's a strong word, but to begin to alter the third dimensional world. And that's when you discover that your thoughts are actually, the foundation of the reality you're living in. And, when you can control those thoughts and you can, bring them, like a laser onto something, that's what creates our reality. It's like nothing. We're trained to believe this third dimension is about the external and about the pursuit and all this stuff, but nothing was ever created in this dimension without the thought of it being created. Skiing, pizza, airplanes, satellites, this all began. It began from consciousness. It was downloaded, and then I think, the role of people and in matter is to build out this physical dimension to a certain degree, and to have experiences while you're doing it. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there because I ventured into something I don't normally say, but and I was like, where does this go?
No, that's awesome. I like it. I trust the stream of information here.
Yeah,
What's happening for me? I mean, it's often said, I don't know if this is in Dispenza's communities or not, but people talk about reality being a hologram, or
yeah,
people say the Matrix, or we're in the movie theater. And of course, it's one thing to get that conceptually. It's probably much later in your evolutionary model when you're actually starting to have that experientially, right?
yeah,
Not just, oh, I get it, that guy says it, but I get it, like I'm actually living this. Um, or another thing it's often described as is a dream, and a dream in the mind of God. So you know,
yeah,
I really like you talk about fractals, right? It's like we all have, in psychotherapy, you go in, it's like, okay, I have my parts, right? I have my imagination of my artist part, and my adventurer part, and my sad part, and my little kid, and my mom and my dad, and they're all in my psyche, and I have all these parts in me. But then if we go out of fractal, it's like, well, Tim and Forrest and Joe Dispenza and Donald Trump and everything, like we're all parts in the mind of the one. We're all parts in
yeah,
God.
yeah. I mean, on the fractal front, and with it, the dream is already here right now. It just exists at a higher octave of consciousness, or a higher rung, you know, of the circletron. And to get to this is kind of a part I left out, but to get to the next level of the circletron, which is the next level of consciousness, which is the next level of self-actualization, I think you have to overcome one of three things: fear, trauma, or limited thinking. And if you don't come up against those things, um, you know, you wind up ping-ponging around the same level of consciousness. Or if you allow fear to really creep in, you can go, you know, into a lower level of consciousness,
Yeah.
and keep having these same experiences in relationships and jobs and with your family, etc. And it's like, okay, what do I have to look at here to break out of this, this level of consciousness to get to the next level of the Circletron, where an entire new, host of possibilities exist. um, I don't even remember what the question was or where we were going. I keep getting like locked into these tangents and then running, but
It's awesome.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah,
I love what you just said. It's the threshold moment either requires us to navigate fear, trauma, or limited thinking.
mm-hmm,
Never heard anybody say that the way you just said it. I love that. Um,
mm-hmm,
and I also am really in love with the biological evolutionary component to your model, speaking about the
yeah,
sperm and the egg, speaking about mirror neurons. There's so many models of how consciousness evolves.
yeah.
But you're tying the biology into the different evolutionary thresholds is incredible. And well, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, I say we are the evolution of energy and biology. So, you know, and I talk about, you just said it. Um, I think we're a threshold species. And all right, I'm gonna walk you through this one. So a couple two, maybe 2 Septembers ago, I was working, with Dr. Zach Bush and thinking a lot about mitochondria and stuff like that. And I'm laying on the couch this one Friday night in September, watching the U.S. Open on tennis. Air condition on, got my blanket, super cozy, and I'm like, ah. I had tickets to see a show at Pappy and Harriet's, which is this like legendary music venue, honky tonk music venue in the middle of nowhere in Joshua Tree, and every huge artist like Paul McCartney stopped there, on the way to Coachella and did a surprise show, and then it just became this landmark. Um, so I'm laying on the couch and I'm like, I should really go up there, but I'm so comfortable. And I decided like, okay, I'm going to do this for my future self. Because sometime in the future, I might not be, ambulatory or live near music. So I go up there, and right as the music's starting, I start to have this download about mitochondria, and and I'm scribbling as fast as I can, and it's like, okay, and it's very there are a lot of kind of steps here. I'm gonna try and get the language correct, but the idea was like we may never have the energy to measure a single mitochondria. So mitochondria is the energy producing uh, ATP in cells. And there could be anywhere from like 200 to 2000 mitochondria in a cell. And mitochondria began as like, you know, bacteria and everything. But at some point, it got absorbed by the cell. So they have this homeostatic relationship. And so I was thinking about like if consciousness is intelligence and a mitochondria is carrying out an aspect of intelligence, while we may never have the technology to measure that small, if something is alive or conscious, it has a field, right? So we know a cell has a field. So I, just, and this is coming in on the dance floor, and I'm scribbling as fast as I can because I'm like, how the hell am I gonna? But if you start at the level of the mitochondria and then you move to the cells and the tissues and everything, like these are all collections of energetic fields. And as you move up the fractal from the mitochondria to the cell to the tissues to the organs, etc., to the human body, like we are this collection of energy fields. We have one energy field, but really we're this collection of energy fields stacked upon each other. And as nature, the nature builds more complexity. So we get to this point, we're at this human body and it's building more complexity, but what are we building towards? Well, right now, I call us a threshold species. And this is the threshold species is a species that is awakening to the fact that energy is greater than matter. And, once we recognize this at a mass scale, and, to recognize that you have to be at a higher elevated state of consciousness, the possibilities are endless. And, I think if we all kind of, sort of tuned into this field, it doesn't even take, you know, it doesn't take the entire earth to do it. You know, energy is the wave is the way energy moves throughout the universe, the wave function. So it only takes a certain amount of people to influence the collective consciousness. So if we got to this higher level, I think we're right there in the middle of it. Like the Epstein files are coming out and all this darkness. It's like when you get to a higher level of consciousness, if everything is a wave and there's constructive and whatever interference, it's like this darkness can hold in the higher wave of light. And I think that's where we are. And, the threshold species, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, I think it's going to be, it's too much to go into like UFOs and, that whole thing and that whole consciousness aspect of it. But who knows, like what a wild, wild time to be alive. I'm an optimist. I think we're in the birth canal right now of something new and greater. But as we all know, well, actually, you and I don't know, but I've heard birthing is very painful. So,
Yeah.
and I still contest that men cannot have babies, but throwing that out there.
I told you so I wrote a book last year called Our Emerging Future, and what you're saying now really rings in the architecture of what I'm writing about. How do we support humanity navigating this threshold moment, moving through this time between worlds, birthing a new world into being, and if there's anything about our personal journeys, right? At some point, like you said, we need to navigate either a fear or a trauma or a limiting belief. We know on
Yeah.
our personal journeys in being and becoming and in pursuing self-actualization or on an evolutionary consciousness journey, we need to oftentimes go back and look in the shadow, look in the pain, look in the places of us that are walled off to be able to have more of us come online, to have more of us in the fold, right? To
Yeah.
be able to move into the next level of consciousness. And so then my book is saying basically what insights can we take from my personal evolutionary journey and from all the people that I've supported and the collectives I've worked with that might actually inform the kind of infrastructure and social fabrics and support that we need on a planetary scale, at the scale of humanity, to be able to help us navigate this transition, because it's very, very likely that we're going to have a collective dark night of the soul. It's very likely that we're going to have what's going on right now, right? The child sex trafficking, human trafficking, pedophilia, the war crimes, all the darkest, most dense, nasty, gnarly things that have been going on and that we've been, low key sort of aware have been going on this whole time. But it's like, hey, if we're going to move into this next iteration of humanity, if we're going to navigate this inflection point in consciousness, this threshold moment, this stuff is going to come out into the light to be included
Yeah.
in that process. So it makes me want to ask you, based on your personal journey and being around luminaries like Joe Dispenza and just all the amazing people in your life. I mean, what kind of support and what kind of support do you feel like humanity needs right now to navigate this threshold moment?
Well, I think it needs conscious leaders, people such as yourself and people who can articulate and shepherd us past over this threshold, and you know to be intentional in creation. There's such a fine line between intention, surrender, and trust. But I kind of look at things like I used to be so wrapped up in it, wrapped up in the story, the charge. And, that is the purpose of the news. They hijack our amygdala, which is, the fight or flight response. And they throw these dangling carrots out there. And like I just look at it now as if I'm watching a movie. And I watch all these like, people on Twitter, you know, one side's calling, one side fascist, the other side's calling them Nazis. And they're like they're arguing about sort of the same thing from a different, of course, there's very big, ideological differences, but people are so in the program that they're just repeating, they're repeating the same story at each other with different language. And it's like, the whole system has been set up to keep us asleep and to keep us at war with each other because a mass of people that are divided are very easy to rule. The last thing a power structure wants is for people to ask why, and that's when the story and the fabric begins to unfold. And I think a lot of people are asking why, and they're seeing in the book I talk about the press as the perception machine. They hijack your amygdala, they plant these stories, and the purpose of it is to divide people. It's like, when are we going to wake up and realize that there are these, I think we are waking up, but there are puppet masters that are keeping people divided intentionally, but there's still such you know a low consciousness happening, that is embroiled in these fights. I mean, I don't really have the answer. I just think of like leaders as lighthouses, and lighthouses, they shepherd people to safety. They provide safety. They point out where the rocks are and everything like that, and they stand the test of time, and they stand in their integrity. Um, so I just think when enough lighthouses start shining their light, people are gonna come to the shores with a new truth.
Mm.
So, I mean, I'm really fortunate that most of the people in my life are high consciousness, people. And, um, so I just, I somehow, I didn't get onto Twitter or X till about 2 years ago, and it's quite addictive. But I just look at it as if I'm watching a movie. Like, this is what I would say to people is like, don't give your energy away to something like that. Keep your energy internal and keep your energy focused on what you can control. So the whole goal is for this system is to feed it with our energy. It's parasitic. And again, the limited thinking, the whole system is to keep us enslaved in limited thinking and servitude of the system. But like when people wake up and realize energy is greater than consciousness, and this is just a blip on, the radar of our maybe energetic trajectory through time, outside of time, through biology. It's like, you know, I think the fear of death is the biggest thing. But if people realize that this is just one phase of our evolution, there's liberation in that. And like, oh, I'm here to have experiences. I'm not here to be fearful and in servitude of some twisted, leaders or system. Anyway, that's my soapbox moment.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, the whole time I'm listening to you, I'm hearing this responsible media and new media. And I don't know if you and the woman that you spoke with yesterday are going to create a public house or not, but at the very, at the very least, which is not a least at all, it's incredibly important. I experience you as a lighthouse and a beacon that's emanating the transmission of a more responsible and conscious, awakened, enlightened media. So I
Yeah,
appreciate
well,
you. I appreciate you for being you and for being the transmission you are. And if there's any way I can encourage you and support you and in embodying that even more fully in life, I'm here for you, man. It's so important and we need it right now.
yeah, I'm sure we'll find ways to collaborate. I mean, my friend who I was talking to yesterday, she had already created this imprint of for her book, and she's like, why don't we just, you can publish it on this, and then, our imagination started running, and we're gonna have a follow-up next week. I don't know. I mean, I know sort of peripherally the publishing industry. I don't know the nuts and bolts and distribution and all that stuff, but I don't know these days how long our bookstore is going to be around. I hope forever, but most people buy their stuff online or their audio. And I don't want to be, I want to be creating my new stuff. I don't want to necessarily be weighed down with editing, whatever. I mean, I love to collaborate with thought leaders and help them bring their message to the world. That's kind of different, but I don't know. Maybe if there's just 3 or 5 books a year and you get a couple key people, a couple, the editors and whatever, it's possible, but there's other people I know who are doing it. So maybe we just have to like join forces. We'll see, but you know,
Yeah,
it's
it might be wise to just have a call with a few people who have a real high resonance around this and get together in an emergent field and just see what happens.
yeah. Yeah. That it's all about the emergent field.
Yeah. Well, Tim, I one of the things I have to accept hanging out with you is I feel like I can talk to you for days and days and days. So
Yeah,
I know you and I
likewise.
have many more conversations to have. It feels like we're coming to an organic pause
Yeah.
point here for today. So I just want to thank you first and foremost for being you, man. I'm continuing to appreciate you more and more. The more I get to know you, I experience you as a tremendous gift. And I'm just grateful that we've gotten connected and are getting to jam in the ways that we are. And yeah, I just wonder, before we pause for today's, is there anything else you want to share? Is there anything that you would feel like you need to say to feel complete for now?
Um, I mean, if you, I would love a like or a or to follow me. But on Instagram, YouTube, um, but I think we have to realize that we are the divine creators of our reality, not a victim. And the system has set us up to be victims. But enough people are waking up, and when we can push back against that in, love and intentionality and unity consciousness, um, we can I was going to say we can decimate the darkness, but let's just say we can bring light to the darkness. And
We can create whatever we want.
exactly. I mean, we are in the process of creating a new earth and a new reality.
That's right.
Hold the line, be conscious, be intentional, be compassionate. And you never know the internal battles other people have gone through or are experiencing.
Mm.
There's been so many times I've like sat next to somebody at like a conference or something, and I'm just like, oh, hoping I'm sitting next to like a beautiful woman or something, and it's like this, I don't know, older person or just somebody I would never expect, and I'm like, oh. And then I wind up talking to them, and they're like the most amazing people, and everybody's going through something on this in this journey of our spiritual evolution. So love and compassion.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity, to share my work, because I'm usually behind the microphone, but uh, it's fun to have the opportunity, and you know for your listeners, if you go to episode number 32 of my podcast, The Inciting Incident, on October 23rd, 25, you'll see how our conversations have evolved and how they will evolve. And it was a great conversation we had. I had a lot of great response to what you had to say too. So we're gonna figure out a way to collaborate.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, at the very least, when your book comes out, we'll have you on the show again. I imagine you'll be back on before then, but if not, we'll definitely have you on to help celebrate your book and share it with the audience. So we got to guarantee, we can definitely mark that in the calendar whenever the book comes out.
Outstanding. Well, I appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to more jibber jabbering.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks everybody. Appreciate having you here. Love you all, and we'll see
Oh, I
you.
guess can I just say like you can find me at the real Tim Shields. Oh, you'll have that all in the this
I'll
show
have it all
notes,
in the
but
show
I'll
notes, but also go ahead. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well, I
Absolutely.
mean my website is
Yeah.
therealtimshields.com and then that's my handle on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Um, so yeah, I'm hoping to start putting out some more content. It's kind of a necessary evil, but I have to change my thinking around that. I have one or two fun creative ideas that I think I'll share with you when we get off.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Well, thank you, and thanks everybody. Appreciate you being here with us, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye bye.